Hi. Hello, welcome to Knock Knock Hi with the Glockenfleckens. I am Dr. Glockenflecken, also known as Will Flannery.
I am Lady Glockenflecken, also known as Kristen Flannery.
Thank you for joining us on your commute or wherever it is you're listening, maybe late at night before you go to bed.
I wonder where people are listening.
Would you listen to this podcast before would you fall asleep to my voice?
Yeah, especially the eyeball episodes.
I would. It's all right.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I should try
you'd
that.
love it. I'm sure my voice really puts you to sleep. This is an exciting day.
Yep.
This is the last episode before our Washington, D.C. live show.
That's right. We are excited to be there at the Howard Theater.
One thing I've really enjoyed when this happens sometimes when I do like keynotes and like graduation speeches and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I love it when people will show up wearing certain things.
Yes,
from my
inspired
skits.
by your characters.
Like
yeah.
bicycle helmets,
Right.
Unicorn headbands.
Yeah.
Great stuff. I
Whatever
love it.
specialty people are, they usually come with the costume for that
One time
specialty. That's so fun.
One time I had a group of infectious disease physicians who all wore shirts that said "The Closer."
Yeah, they had like custom shirts made. It was
Custom
very
shirts
cute.
made with my face on them, and it was the greatest thing
Yeah.
I think I'd ever seen.
So we're trying to make that easier for people,
Yes.
especially with our live shows. Perfect opportunity to come dressed as your favorite Glockenflecken character. So we've created a list on Amazon to make it super easy for you. So we will link it in the show notes or on YouTube in the show description for you to hop on Amazon and find and purchase Glockenflecken certified / approved.
I think there's like a houndstooth
costumes.
coat in there.
Couple of those. There's a bike helmet.
Some gold aviator glass.
That's right. Just poke those lenses right out and you'll be authentic.
Also,
Glockenflecken.
if you just are a lazy medical professional and you want to show up in scrubs, not because you want to dress up as one of my characters, but because you don't want to change out of your scrubs, you would fit right in.
That's right. Don't even
Totally
worry
fine.
about it. That's
All right. Let's talk about our guest today.
Yes. Dr. Jessi Gold.
Dr. Jessi Gold is just, we've had her on the podcast already. She's a psychiatrist. She's a chief wellness officer of the University of Tennessee system. Like we're talking
the whole system.
Like across the state. Just
all the campuses.
So like 5 different campuses. It's amazing. She's also an associate professor in the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Tennessee Health Science Center. Her first book, How Do You Feel? One Doctor's Search for Humanity in Medicine, is out October 8th.
It's going to be a good one. People can pre-order it, or you can order it after it's out, but definitely go check that out.
She's so thoughtful and just you can tell
and fun.
You can tell talking to her, like, man, this is a good psychiatrist.
Yeah.
Like, this is someone, I mean, I think she maybe does a little therapy on us during the episode.
Oh, I don't see how you cannot.
We're
like a walking billboard.
We present it to her like it's on a platter. Like, look at our neuroses. Please do something about this in the 45 minutes we're talking to you. Please, podcast guest. So anyway, we had a wonderful conversation. So should we get to it?
Let's go.
All right. Here's Dr. Jessi Gold. Today's episode is brought to you by the DAX Copilot from Microsoft. DAX Copilot is your AI assistant for automating clinical documentation and workflows, helping you to be more efficient and reduce the administrative burden that causes us to feel overwhelmed and burnt out. To learn more about how DAX Copilot can help reduce burnout and restore the joy of practicing medicine, stick around after the episode or visit aka.ms/knockknockhi. That's aka.ms/knockknockhi. All right, we are here with Dr. Jessi Gold. Jessi, thank you so much for coming back on. We talked to you last on the podcast, like a year ago?
Something like that,
It's been a while.
Yeah.
And just a few things have changed, right?
Just a little bit.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So let me just get this straight. First of all, congratulations on this new job, but I'm just going to describe a little bit of this job here for our audience. So you are the Chief Wellness Officer at the University of Tennessee System, but that's just listen to these numbers.
Okay.
59,000 students
Mm.
19,000 faculty and staff. Sounds busy. I
Yeah.
don't know. It's like I hear those and I think, whoa, no, that's too much. Too many
Just have
people.
80,000 clients. It's fine.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So is that daunting to you? Like, what were you, take us through what you were feeling when you got this job, and congratulations. It's
Thank
amazing.
you. So I guess I'm one of these people who sort of likes a challenge. I think a lot of mentors and stuff
I'd
were
say
like,
so.
a lot of mentors were like, it's new. They don't know what you're really exactly doing. It's big. Are you sure? And I was like, it sounds fun to me. I don't know. I think I've always just been angry at systems and wanting to be in a place
Mhm.
that I could change them. And like, I was given the opportunity to do that. And the reason it's so many the numbers are so big is it's over all 5 campuses, which is basically across the whole state of Tennessee. So probably a lot of people listening who are like
Wow.
healthcare people have heard the chief wellness officer title in a hospital system or in their medical school. And I work at the health science center, which is like medicine and pharmacy, dentistry, nursing, like all of those like
Yeah.
colleges. However, my job is over not just the health science center students, but also like the University of Tennessee students in all of the other campuses. So grad students and undergrad. And that's where the big number comes from. So like if you ever see sports and you watch the Tennessee Volunteers, that would be one of my campuses. So it's fun because I get to kind of combine this long-standing interest in college kids and
Yeah.
healthcare workers, and then get to actually make systems changes. It's going to be slow, which, not everyone loves. And I have to do a lot of the not so sexy stuff like data.
Oh
But
yeah. Yeah. Is this the biggest scale like chief wellness position in the country? I mean, you may not know, but it's got to be one of the biggest. Like,
it's got to be up there.
yeah.
When you look at some people who have this, there are some systems like the UC, like California systems has a person doing it from California, but
Mm.
there's like some limits to what they can actually do on each campus. But since I'm like actually a part of the system that is kind of controlling all 5 campuses, I actually can help on the individual campuses. So I would guess so, but it's really hard to find this stuff out. Like I've
Right.
been slowly
Yeah.
crawling through groups of people that do this stuff, and I'm like, hey, what do you do? Hey, what do you do? Let's talk.
Yeah. Well, it's
So
not, I mean, I don't think so. Maybe there is, but I don't think it's that there's like a conference of chief wellness officers, right? Like
Maybe there
how do
is.
you find your professional network
Yeah,
there?
right.
there's a group of the healthcare ones, but it's hard
Okay.
because I'm not just healthcare focused. So like talking about Epic all day is relevant to part of my life, but not of 4 of the 5 campuses. And so I'm not like super into just talking about Epic all day. So I
Mhm.
think that those folks have built a community and a network as they've grown, but I'm not sure there's as much in sort of just the generic academic space, if you want to call what I'm doing that.
Right.
So I have questions about both the healthcare space and with wellness and the college space, which I know far less about. But I know in the healthcare space, it seems like wellness, the term wellness has been kind of like co-opted into this, you know, kind of
Squishy.
squishy, not really defined, kind of almost uh, not a real thing, or looked down upon, or associated with pizza parties and nurses week gifts of like a rock because you're a rock for our community. So what are your thoughts about that, and how are you going to try to change the narrative here about what wellness is on the healthcare side?
I think I've always had the fun job of swimming in the words that we've totally messed up the definitions of. So mental health in general is just like co-opted really wrong all the time. But then like doing this kind of work, you've got resilience, which people hate. You've got
Mm.
wellness,
Yeah.
which people hate. So I'm doing really well there. But
It's
You
like
gotta
literally,
have-
it's
you need a
literally in your
PR.
title, Jesse.
Yeah,
Like
it is
wellness,
in my title.
like what are you gonna do?
It is in my title. There's nothing I can do about it. It's really interesting. Like I asked on social once, like how people defined it, and every single person had a different definition. And I think that's one of the hard things about wellness is it is like in some way individual, but there are these sort of like decided upon versions that come from health administrations and come from research and include these like 8 domains, which is not just emotional wellness, but also like physical, spiritual, financial, social. I could keep going, but there are 8. But, I think inherently we cringe because it's been used in those settings when it really is all of it. So I'm not just like the chief mental health officer who is only over counseling and only doing crisis, right? And so wellness at least lets you say, it's not just being sick, right? And so there's this whole spectrum of like prevention to intervention and across all these domains that you could look at when you're thinking about wellness. I think we just don't use it right. And I think we use it interchangeably with well-being, which is also super confusing. And I think everybody's just like, why is that your title? But inherently, it's the broadest possible title, meaning I could do a lot of different things and sort of I'm aware that all those things intersect, if that makes sense.
I think you just laid out the premise for your second book.
What is this thing
What?
that somebody
Yeah.
gave me this title? What does it mean? But my favorite answer on social was like, I'm pretty sure that was a Rorschach test. And I was like, you're right. It is like one of those words that like you could look at and it might mean like
Right.
fish to you or like flying animals or like that's me, like hanging out with my friends, right? Like a Rorschach test, which like I've never done ever. But, I think inherently
Really? That's not a thing anymore, huh?
they don't teach it to us. I mean, maybe they teach therapists that, but it's like more of this kind of thing they make fun of psychiatrists about,
Right.
like many things.
Right.
But I think that was a funny answer from the person because it is like this word we just throw around a lot and people use however they
Right.
want. And I guess in a way, like in a big role that's new, that you get to decide what you're doing, you're kind of defining that as part of
Mhm.
it.
I think burnout's another one of those words.
Mm.
What?
It is.
What does your anxiety go up when you hear someone just mention burnout as kind of like a catch-all for having a difficult time at work? Like I don't know. What do you tell us about burnout?
Yeah, I mean, so let's just name all more words that go with what I do that people don't know what they mean. I think that burnout, especially over the pandemic, but even before, people started using it like I just am tired from work or work is like more than it should be or I don't like work or whatever and so I'm burnt out.
Mm.
And really like when we're thinking about it from sort of a research perspective, because they're who really defined the word. It's this constellation of 3 things, with one thing being emotional exhaustion, which to most people really looks like physical exhaustion. So, like at the end of the day, you're just spent. The second one varies between studies. So it can be cynicism, meaning like you're kind of angry about the world, or depersonalization, meaning like you're just disconnected, which can be kind of interesting in healthcare because we're taught to be disconnected. But it's like, I always describe it as like that thing that makes you who you are in your field is like the thing you're missing. So maybe you're not making a mistake, but maybe like you're not as connected to patients as you would be, or not as connected to colleagues as you would be. And so you're not actually practicing at like 100%, even though you think you are. And then the last one is a reduced sense of personal accomplishment. I think that's self-explanatory. But in my opinion, that's the one that people go, oh, something's wrong with
Mhm.
me. Because like they did
Mm.
something that like someone noticed, or they noticed themselves not doing as much work. The other ones, I feel like people go, well, I'm supposed to be emotionally exhausted from work. Well, I'm supposed to be depersonalized because that's
Right.
how we deal with this stuff. And the last one is like, oh, wait, no, I'm not doing work. That's a problem. Interestingly, it's not like a diagnostic criteria in a psychiatric manual. Like we haven't put it there yet. It's all like a workplace
Oh,
associated
really?
condition.
Okay.
Yeah,
DSM hasn't gotten its claws into it yet? No?
no, we haven't. We haven't. And like some people would argue we won't, but really it's because we keep it in this like workplace associated condition category, meaning like it's the workplace that causes those things. It can be broadly defined, right? So if you're a stay-at-home mom and your workplace is home, that can still make you burnt out. Or if you're in school and your workplace is school, same thing, but it's from work. It's from the systems that are like causing all those symptoms.
Mm. One thing that I think is so unique also about your job here is going from healthcare to college, and specifically like med students to college. So I'm curious what kind of overlap you see, because there's not a lot separating those in both time and probably some of the stresses that they're under. So I'm curious what you're noticing as the chief wellness officer that encompasses both of those groups?
Yeah, for some reason we believe that people like are fine and then they go to med school and med school messes them up. Like
Yeah.
there's some data, right, that says like when we go to med school, our depression is equivalent to age match peers and then we get more sad than them. And maybe that's true, but we're missing something there. If you've ever been around a bunch of pre-meds, you know that that's its own beast and there's something going on there and there's a ton of anxiety and a
Oh,
ton of
yeah.
perfectionism and a ton of overwork, right? Like we're doing all these things and it's super hyper competitive. And so, I've always been interested in that group. I did my master's on basically pre-med as a culture in anthropology because
Oh,
I was like
interesting.
sitting there being
Really?
like, yeah, because I was watching as a pre-med going like, oh, I like that person. They dropped out. Like, why? Like, what's going on that all of the people who I think would be
Uh-huh.
like really awesome doctors and are really nice, what's going on that they're all leaving? And I was really curious about that when I was in med school or even before I was in med school and then kind of continued on with that interest. And so I've always seen college students as patients. So it's interesting to be able to now do it from a more administrative perspective. But, I don't think we're like fine. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on in college that's its own unique thing, like identity development, experimentation, first time away from home.
Right.
Like I could go on that first break for a lot of different psychiatric illnesses around that time anyway. But then you add like, now I want to be a doctor, and that's super normal. And it's a lot of competition and a lot of stress. And I think if you kind of follow that forward, you can see how we become the way that we are. And if we would learn that stuff earlier, maybe we'd be better at coping. I don't know.
How much is like test anxiety a part of this? Because there's been a lot of press, obviously, in med school about how to approach step one, how to approach these tests, pass, fail. Like, is that helping or hurting or doing anything at all? So, can you talk about like testing the anxiety? Because that's something I'm sure there's a lot of overlap there.
Oh, sure. I mean, I have really bad test anxiety. You wouldn't be able to tell if you saw where I went to school because you'd probably say I must have figured it out. And I didn't. I just figured out how to do a lot of other stuff. So they kind of ignored my test scores. But, test anxiety is a huge part of it, especially standardized tests. We have these sort of like arbitrary ways of deciding who can get interviews or who can get to the next level of things. And so it puts a lot of pressure on people. I mean, starting in high school for things like SATs, ACTs, and kind of
Right.
continuing on, like we don't ever stop having tests. I mean, I think we have them all the time, which is part of the problem. But, it's like this pressure of like, if I don't do well on this, I can't be X, Y, or Z. I won't
I'm
get
a
into
failure.
X, Y, and
Yeah.
Z. I'm a failure. There's a lot there. And, I have a lot of patients who, like, before tests, like, their anxiety is like 10 out of 10 always. They can't sleep, their stomach hurts, they're throwing up, like they need meds for tests to be able to even like sit and take it. And I
Oh,
think
wow.
that, that kind of anxiety, maybe not everybody has. I think everybody can kind of understand the 3 or 4 where you're like, it can mess up my ability to do some of this stuff. But for when those folks are like 10 out of 10, they'll like skip pages on the test and not realize they did. And they'll like, I had a patient go to the wrong test center.
Oh no. Oh my
Like
gosh.
things
Mhm.
like that, like and then you go and then they won't let you take it. And
Mhm.
that just compounds it, right? So test taking anxiety is a big part of kind of what's going on in young folks, but especially young folks trying to be doctors.
Sure. Did you, Kristen? Do you ever have test anxiety? I don't
I
remember you.
didn't. I mean, a little bit of nerves, right, is normal. Like you're saying, I don't know if I would even call it a 3 or 4, but I was the real nerd. I kind of thought tests are fun.
Someone has to.
It's like a
Oh my
little game or
God.
a challenge or something. I mean, not every class, but most of them.
Kristen is also the least competitive person I've ever met because I think
Yeah.
a lot of test anxiety is also like how you compare to your peers, right? You don't want to fall behind or you don't want to be embarrassed, compared to your friends. I don't think you probably feel any of
I'm more
that
of like
at
a
all.
rebel of like, who cares? Right?
Mm.
Like
How
That's
I
how
am what
how
I
fortunate
am.
for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so mature of you. I mean, I
I
didn't
I
Jeez.
have
mean,
that
look,
at
it
all.
might sound mature and healthy, but I think there's also some pathology there. I'm just like, forget all of
W-
you
w-
and your standards. I'm
You
gonna
have
do
like
my
test
thing.
taking narcissism. Yeah, I mean, I get it. I mean, I don't know. I wasn't like that. So in high school, when I took the ACT and they were like, you have 10 minutes left or whatever, and I started to get super nauseous and I ran out and threw up, and then I canceled my scores.
Oh, wow.
And I had felt bad before, but that was bad.
Did they
Yeah.
did they take that out of your break time?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't go back.
Oh, you
I
just
threw up.
left. Oh, wow.
I threw up,
Yeah.
and then I left, and I was like, "Can I cancel my scores? What happens?" And they were like,
Yeah.
You paid for it, but it goes away because you didn't finish." And I was like, "Cool, I didn't finish."
Yeah.
And I just
let's do
knew that like I wasn't gonna be able to like get back on the horse and call it a day for the rest of the test, because I'd be like so anxious about that one section or
Right.
what I did. And so I'm very aware of the test taking anxiety stuff. I'm much better now, but
I took. I just shouldn't admit these things.
you should.
I took I can't remember if it was the SAT or the ACT.
You took the ACT. I remember that.
Well, I took both. But what I'm going to say is my freshman year, my older brother was a senior and he was taking all those things for college and stuff. And I was like, I want to try. That looks fun. So I started taking them for fun my freshman year, and then just like kind of kept, let's see if I can get higher the next time. And I was like competing against myself and to see if I could beat my brother.
Aren't you something?
I am. Well, look, I'm not bragging. This is weird behavior.
That's very strange behavior. Let me tell you what I think my worst test taking experience was the MCAT.
Oh, that was awful.
It's a very challenging test. And by the way, I took the last paper and pencil MCAT that occurred.
Well, aren't you special?
I'm so proud of that.
Yeah.
Anyway, I wanted to ask you, Jessi. So after the test, I
need to preface this with he got a great score.
I got a good score.
I'm sure he did.
So it's not that he didn't.
But
what he's not saying is I did poorly on this test.
No. So after the test, I really was like convinced, honestly convinced, not just saying that, honestly convinced that I had done it very poorly, failed it. No way I'm going to med school. I like sat in the dark in my room, my dorm room, just like
I had to stage an intervention.
I didn't want to do anything, eat. I was like, my life
he was
is
like
over.
fully depressed.
No. Well, I don't think I was, but
You were lying in the dark and wouldn't get up even to
I have a question for Jessi.
I want to hear about
Jessi.
the depression, okay?
Yeah. What was that?
That was depression.
What was the,
Well, you know what?
I
I'll
don't
say a
think
couple
it was
things.
depression.
I'll say
I
a
don't-
couple of things. So one is that like you're so built up, like even going, like let's say you're going to run a marathon and you finish the marathon and you have nothing left and you're just like, it's almost like all your adrenaline fades from your body and all that's left is nothing, and that can look like depression. But if you put on top of it like, and I also think I failed, like of course then like all the negative thoughts will come with it. So you have this big buildup with tons of anxiety and tons of like preparation. Then it's over, and so all that kind of goes away, and then you're like, oh, but I also did badly, and I won't know for a while how badly I did, and so I'm just going to ruminate on that. So it obviously
you are
can't
the
be like,
master ruminator.
yeah.
I do
So
love ruminating.
it's not going to be like depression as
Right.
grossly defined, but I do think it's a bit of this like post-test like downturn as a result of the energy you put into it, the lack of sleep you put into it, and then you're like, and also I did badly and I'm going to feel badly about that. Like for me, after I took step 1, I went through a drive-through because I was like, I'm going to celebrate. I went through a drive-through and then like paid and got home, and I was like, I didn't stop at the second window.
Oh,
Like I straight up left. Like I paid
you
and
forgot
left.
to get your stuff.
I forgot to get my food. But I think it's like that same, like I literally I like was like, oh, I'm gonna do this, and then my memory was all sorts of weird because I just sat in a test for 8 hours, and I was just like,
Your brain's in like some kind of weird
Fugue
state.
state.
Yeah. It's like
exactly.
dissociating itself.
Yeah, like I wasn't depressed, but I was like not with it. Like I've
Yeah.
never done. Like I literally just drove. Like I just drove past the window. The people
I
were
would
probably
love
like,
to hear what
happened?
they said. Yeah, inside.
What the hell is going on here?
What's wrong? She just give us a tip because I did. I guess I just gave them money
Yeah.
for nothing. So but I didn't
That
realize till I got home
person's gonna
either.
be a doctor?
No,
Really?
right?
That's what we're dealing with here?
I'm more interested for you in the like, why are you convinced that you did so poorly when then you get your score back later and it's great? Like
So
that's a theme with you too. I
well,
want to know
no, I
what
would
that is.
say
Jesse, analyze us,
no,
would you?
listen, that was the worst experience of like
I think it
example
was
of
just
that.
like that was the hardest test you hadn't really experienced a test that hard before. But even though it
That's
was
true.
hard,
It
you
was
still
by
did
far
well.
the hardest test I'd ever taken. But I will say my response to like subsequent tests, like step 1, step 2, I felt like I didn't have that extreme reaction. So
Yeah.
maybe it was just
Well,
I
you did always think you did worse than you end up doing. But yeah,
true.
you didn't lie in the dark alone.
And so maybe it's just I was maturing.
Yeah.
I had certain examples where I knew in my deep within my soul, like, okay, I have done okay before.
hmm
And so this is gonna probably turn out okay, but there's
Right. The more
still
you do it, you're like, I
yeah.
recognize this feeling and it turned out okay before. So
So I don't know.
yeah.
See, I'm just having Jesse here is leading me to
You're like
discover things about
self-reflecting.
myself.
Yeah.
You don't
I
have to
appreciate
say
it.
anything.
Yeah.
I could feel it coming from you. And
I was trying not to say anything. It's a whole bit. Just let you keep going.
Yeah.
But I think that some of the like feeling like you failed thing comes from like what is good. Like who decides like what that is? And it's at a young
that's a good
age,
question.
it's like an A or something, right? Or like in a
Mhm.
test like that, it's like whatever the highest you could
number is,
possibly
yeah.
get is in a number. It's not like fine or like a B. Like
Mhm.
it's you have to be perfect. So
Right.
if you have to be perfect, like you're always going to think you failed because you can't know that you were perfect on something, and you're always going to see someone else who looks like they know more in a test center, or a friend who brags about something, or something where you just don't feel like you could have possibly measured up even if you did, because your brain's like, but you can't miss anything.
Right.
Like I remember in college with curves, like, you got a 60 and that was an A, and I always felt bad. Like I never felt good after tests. I'd be like, even if I get an A on this, I didn't know much. Like I only knew 60%. Like if
Right.
that's what you want, that's fine, but you don't feel good after that. You feel like, well, I think I got enough right to not fail this or something, but you don't feel like you actually know the material. Or in tests like that, you're like, I have to be perfect to get into optho. Like
Mhm.
get into a good med school, whatever you're attaining, then you sort of like are at this really arbitrarily defined stage of great. And I think that's one of the reasons people try to think that the pass fail thing helps. But as far as I can tell,
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about this.
as far as I can tell, making some of that stuff pass fail has led to competition in other ways, right?
Right.
Ooh,
So
say more about that.
what you're seeing is like kids think that they need like 15 papers to apply to residency.
Right.
Like
Oh.
because you can't compare them on a score, so you're going to compare them on their extracurricular activities. I always had a lot of extracurriculars because I was trying to hide my score. But now
Yeah.
everybody has to do it because they aren't hiding their score. They just don't have they just get a
Yeah.
similar one to everyone else. So we're seeing like
Interesting.
a lot of arbitrary competition, and like it coming out in weird ways like that. Maybe they'll do more OAs because they think they need to get them, or maybe
Right.
they'll do like more research because they have to,
Right.
or maybe
It's
you know
less
like
clear how to stand apart from your peers, and you're
but you
still
think you
competing
have to,
for
right?
jobs and
Yeah.
whatnot. Yeah.
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 And you think you have to. And again, like what is the best resume you could possibly have if tests don't count? So while as a person who doesn't like tests, I like the idea of like taking out the pressure of like that score being the defining element. It does mean that people find other ways, because it's just it's kind of what has to happen because we don't have enough spots, which is its own other conversation, right? Which is like, if you got
Right.
into med school, should you get to practice medicine? You should.
Yeah.
So if you already fought the competition for med school, we shouldn't have this problem where then people don't match. And so that's a whole nother thing, right? And so we just have a system that's like built on competition and arbitrary competition and trying to be the best. Or if you're not, like you don't measure up or you
Mhm.
don't get in. And I think the whole system is kind of built like that.
And new med school spots are outpacing new residency spots, which
Mm.
obviously is going to make things worse. But I would also argue that the one of the defining characteristics of a med student is perfectionism, and that doesn't really go away I think even if a test is pass fail, like the stress is still going to be there, and you're still going to expect perfection from yourself. And so I don't know, when I first heard about this pass fail step one, I was like, oh, I think that would be a good thing. But then the more like I've thought about it and heard from other people, it just, I don't know. I think the intention was in the right place, but uh, in
Well, it seems like we
reality,
treated the symptom, not the cause, right? Like it
yeah,
just shifted to other places. So that obviously wasn't
yeah,
the root of the issue, is that one test.
right. Well, there are also still exams that are like there's still step two and step three,
Right.
and I think a lot of it's just you know put down the line to the
Yeah,
other
kick the
tests.
can
So
down the road to
Yeah.
something
exactly,
else. But you're like, well, there's still tests. It's like
yeah,
what I always tell patients who have test taking anxiety that, like, as much as they can kind of get over it for tests for medicine,
mhm,
that there's still so many tests. So if it's like the worst thing they could possibly do and they hate it so much and they don't want to do it, that medicine is not great for that because
Right.
there's so many. Like it doesn't stop. Like it's not like
Yeah.
an LSAT and then that's it or whatever, but you have to do all these other things. So I think it doesn't work well if you don't love tests or you don't figure it out.
Right.
well, let's take a quick break. We'll come right back. All right, we are back with Dr. Jessi Gold. I'm so glad we got to have that discussion about test anxiety because I've been curious about that. And
Yeah.
I wanted my own diagnosis of what the hell happened to me after the MCAT. So I
Yeah. Do you feel
appreciate
like you
that.
got it? Do you
I
have
do.
closure?
I feel great. I feel good about it. I feel like I'm not unusual, and I think you're probably the outlier, to be
I
honest.
usually am. So that would check out.
I envy. I mean, I envy people like you though. Like my high school roommate was like that. She like went and took the SATs once, and she got like missed like two things, and was like, "I'm good."
Well, look, it's
Um,
not like I was perfect at it. It's just I kind of thought it was like a fun puzzle.
Yeah,
You
Yeah.
know?
it didn't.
yeah,
I don't know.
Your brain approached
I
it
should
differently.
yeah.
look, I never claimed to be a normal person. Okay. So
Normal's boring though.
Yeah.
So.
All right, so Jessi, you mentioned earlier about, or maybe I'm the one that mentioned it, that you're just like you sit there sometimes and you just don't say anything. You just let the person like
yeah.
diagnose themselves, kind of to a certain extent. So that brings up the idea of using silence, and that's something we're taught early in med school. I just wanted to feel the silence and
I thought we were
how
playing chicken.
how awkward it was. I don't know. I still struggle with it. And even though it's like it was like drilled into our heads as a early med student, like it's okay to like sit there and like not talk because someone's going to say something, and sometimes it's something from the patient and it's really important. But oh man, it's so hard to do. What's the
Yeah.
key?
I wish I could tell you I was so good at it. In psychiatry residency, when we learn psychotherapy, we like get taped and then we watch our tapes back with supervisors and co-residents and stuff.
Ugh, sounds
And
awful.
yeah, it's sort of like football or
Yeah.
something, but it's your psychotherapy skills. And I always get dinged on sort of like jumping in too fast or not sitting with it long enough. And so I used to practice like sitting way past the point of discomfort and seeing if I could handle it. And I would do that for training. And that's how I've gotten a little bit better at it. I think it's way easier to do if a person's emotional, because if a person's like crying and stuff, like you understand that your presence is supportive and you're there just to like help them. And if they're crying, you're like, okay, if I sit here, they'll talk to me when they feel ready. But if they're just sitting there staring at you and you're there staring at them, it's weird. Like,
Well, okay.
it's
From the
weird.
patient perspective, though, that is also weird. Like, we don't know that this is a thing that is supposed to happen, right? We're just walking in as a normal human on planet Earth. And in our society, if there is silence, like that's going to throw me for a loop as a patient. If it's not like I'm talking and you're just allowing me to continue talking, but it's literally we walk in, I sit down and we stare at each other. Like it's not clear to me that I'm supposed to
Yeah.
like that's a
Uh-huh.
weird social violation
Yeah.
that now I don't know how to navigate.
Old school psychotherapy, like Freud, that's what the couch is about. Like, really, you're
Yeah.
just supposed to just like sit and see what comes up. Psychoanalysis is like that too. But, I think silence does like bring up stuff for people when they get time to think or they get time to like process and tell you what's on their mind, or it might be the thing that they were avoiding saying comes up or something. But I do think it's like a skill you should use in certain points, and that like just using it all the time isn't very helpful. Like I don't
Or
feel
like
like I've ever
starting
had
with
that.
it. That
Yeah.
seems weird. Like how if the whole thing is supposed to be talking, I need at least like a starting place, right? Give me a prompt, ask me a question,
Yeah.
something. I don't know.
I've
That's just
had
really
people be
weird.
like,
Yeah,
what's
what's
going on?
happening?
What is happening
Yes.
here?
Like, is this what we're doing? Or
Right. I'm
like, are
paying
you
you
gonna,
to just sit here.
yeah,
What
you
are we
gonna ask me
doing?
a question, or
Well,
are
you,
you just
you
gonna keep
mentioned
looking?
it's helpful for like when a patient is experiencing emotion, but you mentioned crying. What about the opposite? What about like people who are angry? Do you feel like it's also helpful there? Like because everybody who sees patients has had an angry patient in front of them. Like
Mhm.
what do you feel like is the way to approach that?
Yeah, I mean, not telling them they're wrong about their anger, you know? Like,
Right,
I
true.
think we have a tendency, I mean, psych gets called for consults on people who are screaming and angry because people don't want to deal with them. But really, it's like there's something that happened to them in the hospital. They don't feel heard. They feel like they're being ignored, whatever it is. The anger is coming from somewhere. And so, being able to just kind of like let them be angry and be like, I can see that you're angry. Like, how can I help? Instead of being like, I don't know what you're talking about. That didn't happen. I think we get defensive when people are angry. Like we want to fight back or we want to say, like,
Mm.
you're wrong. That's not what happened. Here's how I was better than you think I was. Right. But it's unhelpful because inherently the content doesn't matter. The emotion does, if that
Right.
makes sense. And so, like, I don't care really why someone's angry. If I can fix it, sure, I am listening. But it's not as much like that they didn't get a glass of water when they asked for it. It's that they're mad that they didn't get a glass of water because they feel alone and scared. And that's more important, if that makes sense.
Yeah, anger seems like a trickier emotion because I don't know that there is just anger for the sake of anger, right? Like
Mm,
happiness it just is like it's kind of like primary colors, right? Happiness might be kind of like a red or a whatever, but like anger is always a a cover on something else. Right? Like it's like an iceberg or something and anger is just the tip, but there's something underneath
mhm,
that's actually the problem. So it's a tricky one cuz what presents isn't necessarily the thing that needs fixed.
right.
And it has a lot of cultural context wrapped up in it, like gendered and various different ethnicities have all of these things that being an angry whatever is problematic. And so people also get very worried about being perceived a certain way for
Mm,
being angry. And so, I think anger is also one of those things that we try to cover up really quickly because we don't want those perceptions. So, like, sitting with anger and just being mad is not something we like. Like, we want to slam a door and get attention and have someone come talk to us and fix it. We don't want to just be angry. Like, that's not fun.
Mhm.
And so we always try to kind of cover it up for lots of reasons, but the cultural ones also come into play there. And I think, I don't like sitting with anger. Like, I think clinicians, sometimes anger is a easier thing to deal with than other emotions in the workplace. But I think that I don't like being angry at patients. I think that's a really
mhm,
hard thing. And sometimes I am, and I have to deal with that. But it makes you feel guilty
mm,
that you're angry.
yeah.
Mhm.
Well, since we're talking about emotions, let's play a little game here.
Okay.
Okay. So I have a game that is creatively called defense mechanisms.
God.
What could it be about?
So I'm going to read you a scenario, and you tell me either what the defense mechanism is that's happening here, and if it's like a mature one.
Oh
Okay, because
gosh. Okay.
they're like good defense mechanisms, and they're like not so good defense
Are there?
mechanisms.
I mean, I guess that's a question to
Yeah,
start with.
like humor. Like humor is the classic
Like would we call that
example.
a defense mechanism or a coping skill though?
Both.
I think yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So, like, sometimes humor is used because something else is going on and it helps you kind of defend against it. But sometimes humor is used like because you like to laugh and it
Yeah.
makes you feel better. So, I guess that's how I would tell the difference.
Okay.
That's good. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So here we go.
Let's test how much I remember, which
Yeah,
is
yeah.
probably It's so funny. Like I was like, oh gosh, let's see if I remember the names of these
I-
things.
it's fine because I did not remember the names of most of these things, and so it's like it, but the words for them are sometimes kind of strange. All right, so here we go. The med student is in the operating room, holding a retractor and struggling. The surgeon gets mad and takes the retractor and throws it at the anesthesiologist in response.
I think that's displacement. It's like kicking the dog when you're mad at something else. But
Is the anesthesiologist the dog in this
yeah,
analogy?
I think so. Because I think like something stopped him from yelling at the student because maybe he had a lecture yesterday on mistreatment. But that would be the only thing I could think of that would have stopped that from happening. But throwing it to someone else, I think would be displacement, but I could be wrong.
I think that is. I probably screwed up. I have
What did you
acting
have?
out.
Oh,
Acting
that's
out.
also so acting
Probably
out would
both.
it's probably both. So acting out is like what you like. It's obviously immature. It's like what kids do. Like when I said
Yeah.
slamming a door, it's like I'm just gonna throw things, right? Like
Yeah.
that's acting out. And so yeah, I mean, I think the throwing thing is that, and then because you made him throw it at
Yeah.
not the person causing the problem, that's displacement.
Oh, that's a good.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good point. All right. Either way, probably not the best way to
No,
deal
those
with.
count as like immature. Like, they aren't really classified as like good or bad. They're classified as like immature or mature, but you can
Oh.
take that for what it is. It's
Right.
just like, do you kind of act like you would as a kid to do these kind of things, or are you doing something that required like some self-awareness and growth?
All
Right.
right. All right. Here's the next one. As a consequence to the surgeon's actions in the operating room, he has an appointment with administration to discuss his behavior. But the night before, he calls in and says he has to take a sick day, so he doesn't have to go to the appointment.
So it's an avoidance tactic. But I'm
Avoidance.
trying.
That's
Is that
right.
what? Okay,
That's
good.
the defense mechanism.
I'm not even. I was like, is that a defense mechanism? But I
It
think
technically is.
Yeah, I think a lot of us do that. I think it's a common thing, but sometimes it's, a lot of these are unconscious, right? Like we aren't like, I'm taking a sick day because I don't want to go to that meeting tomorrow. But sometimes we just then feel sick and don't go, right? And
Mm,
so, like, keep in mind that a lot of this stuff isn't conscious. Like, you're not going, like,
that's a
I
good
want
point.
to avoid this, so I'm going to do this. Like, sometimes we just avoid it. Like, we'll go do something else and overwork because we don't want to do the other project that we have. But it's not like we're consciously going, I'm not doing this, so I'm going to do this instead. We're just doing the other thing.
It's like when you had a test and then the night before your baseboards would get real clean.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Yeah, you just do. And you're not like, I don't want to study. I'm going to do this instead. But you're
Yeah.
like,
That's a good
oh,
point.
it
Like
looks really
suddenly
dirty.
I
Like,
have
oh,
to do
those are
this
so
thing.
dirty. I have to do that.
Or you
Right?
decide
Yeah.
you need to clean the top of the refrigerator.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. You're like, it looks real dirty up there. Let me see how long that takes.
Yeah.
All right, here's one. Okay, after being berated by the surgeon, the student who was in the operating room with the retractor, who all
So he
that,
didn't get it thrown at him, but he did get
he
berated.
got berated. Sorry,
Okay.
I forgot to mention that.
Okay.
That probably would change
Oh,
things. The
yeah, it
student
does.
goes home and yells at all the spatulas in his apartment and throws them away.
Did you say spatulas?
Spatulas.
I mean, is that also displacement?
That's displacement. That's
Okay.
what I had for displacement.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So I get displacing the anger
To the
For-
inanimate object.
to the inanimate object that looks kind of like a retractor. Okay.
Yeah. A lot of times you'll see this, like, if you had a bad day at work and you're angry at work, but you come home and yell at your partner, like, it's
Yeah.
not about your partner, right? Like, your partner didn't do anything. They just kind of like are in this cloud that you're already in. And it was easier to yell at your partner than your boss.
I would say that example, though, is healthy on behalf of the student because they displace their anger to an inanimate object. That
Yeah. The spatulas would disagree.
Okay, all right. Here's the next one. Family medicine. These are all happening in the Glockenflecken cinematic universe, by the
Oh,
way.
okay.
So, family medicine finds himself daydreaming about admin walking through the door and offering him a scribe to do his documentation for him.
Ooh. That's got to be in the mature set of things because you're like trying to fix a problem even if you don't have it. Um, hmm.
On the list, I have this listed as fantasy.
Oh, that's fair.
Apparently, that's the name of a coping mechanism.
That's funny. Yeah, I guess it could be fantasy. Like that would work
Sorry, family medicine.
someday when you
It's
get all the money.
fantasy. When your money tree starts growing money.
Yeah.
Okay, here's one. I had never heard this one, so this might be kind of hard. After being
Oh,
told
good.
after being told by neurology that he is a real life walking homunculus, Bill the resident begins walking stooped over with his hands dragging the floor and purchases size 24 shoes even though he only wears a 12.
Gosh. So
I don't think you're gonna get.
I'm wondering what your source material was for these
no, I mean,
defense
this story is
mechanisms.
funny, but this story's kind of funny.
This is a
But
hard
like,
one.
like part of me would say there's like a regression element to it, but it's not regression because they're acting like the thing you said they are. Reaction formation,
I have this listed as introjection.
introjection. What does that mean? Did you
Which is-
see what
Okay,
it
see,
said?
when the psychiatrist
Which
says,
is
what does that mean? I could tell.
Maybe that doesn't even exist. I don't know. It was
no,
on
it
the
probably
list of
does.
things.
It probably
It's like-
does.
It's like you're told by someone in an authority position that you receive some kind of criticism and you internalize that criticism and then start to actually express that criticism in your
Like
life.
projection, but
Yeah, projection,
introjection
but
because it's going internal.
exactly. You're
That makes
internalizing. You're internalizing the criticism, and it's coming out.
And then you act, and then you become the
and
criticism.
you become the criticism. Yes.
Yeah. In a extreme state, homunculus.
He's
Yeah, I
becoming.
think-
Bill's becoming a homunculus, a
I
real
think
life walking homunculus.
That makes sense. I think that, these are
You'd
the
have to
things
get lip
that like
fillers.
yeah,
right.
these are the things that like when you go study for boards or something that like you learn and then you like kind of know that somebody's using a defense, right? Like I can pick
Yeah.
it out. Like if you're talking to me, I'll be like, oh, like you changed the topic or that thing happened, and I might like classify that as a defense in my head, but might not actually know the name of it. Just for those students listening who are like, do I need to use this for the rest of my life? Or who are like, this chick doesn't know anything. Here's how I view it. It's just like, I can point out when people are doing it, but I
Right.
might not know the exact name all the
Oh
time.
yeah, for sure. I mean, I can't imagine in the situation where you need to know with the patient.
Right,
Oh,
it's
this
not
is
like you're gonna
called
say-
introjection.
Right.
Yes. Like, come on.
Did you know you were using introjection?
That's right.
Like it would be such a weird conversation. I noticed you were using introjection.
Right.
What does that mean? Well, I noticed that when they called you a homunculus, you became one.
I
You'd be
love
like,
it.
that's weird.
I
All
love it.
right.
All right, here's a good one. I think this is good. I think
Okay.
this is a good one.
Oh, good God.
All right. A new internal medicine intern begins carrying around a carton of Morton salt and hissing cardiology at people during nephrology rounds.
That's funny.
Another
It's
example
not
of this.
humor.
Yeah.
That would probably work. Another example of this would be like somebody moving to a new country and adopting that country's mannerisms and way of speaking to try to fit in, which is
Just
what
assimilation.
I have. Yeah, I have listed this as
a thing.
identification.
Identification.
Identification, which sounds like a healthy coping mechanism to me.
Becoming like, I think it probably has some healthy components until you
Could
become
go
somebody
wrong,
else.
though. Yeah.
Until you
Yeah.
start pissing off the cardiologist.
Well, just
Yeah.
then what is your own identity anymore?
Yeah.
Eventually.
Oh, that's true. Kind of losing that.
I think
But-
that happens to a lot of us, right? Like I think inherently like to get through a lot of training, like we do identify with like the culture of the whatever we're on to be able to survive and not get bad evaluations. And so you're like becoming like that and then you're like, wait, do I throw things now?
Yeah, right.
Like is that how I feel?
Where did all my spatulas go?
Yeah, maybe I just throw things at people.
All right. Well, I appreciate the.
I did horribly. I
no,
did
no,
absolutely
No, I don't
horribly.
think you were
No,
the
I
problem in
appreciate
this.
I want to shout out to the random website that listed all of these words and defense mechanisms that may or may not be really the names of the things that I was
No,
describing.
those are things, I think. I just don't remember them.
I love it. Well, that's great. That's great. But you know it. Like you said, you
Yes.
know it when
It's
when
been
you hear it.
internalized.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You introjected it into
I
your
am the
personality.
defense mechanism.
Yes.
All right. Well, we got to talk about your book because this
Yeah.
is very exciting. Congratulations, your
Thank you.
first book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is called "How Do You Feel? One Doctor's Search for Humanity in Medicine." It's coming out soon, right?
October, yeah.
October 8th. So tell us about it.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been a person who was like, I'm going to write a book, but I have been a person who pays attention and has always written small pieces. And I realized that over the pandemic and with conversations with people that like our mental health and our well-being was something I cared a lot about and thought about differently than other people. So I had something to say. And so the book is part memoir, part patient narrative, and all the patients are healthcare workers or healthcare worker adjacent. So there's a pre-med in there, like we kind of talked about at the beginning. And it's really about like why it's hard to care for ourselves when we care for other people. And it looks at all the themes in there, like perfectionism is a big one, overwork's a big one, burnout comes up, licensure, stigma, like whatever I can possibly think of that sort of causes us to not get help when we need it or wait to get help later or judge ourselves for getting help in the first place. And I think it's a cool way of doing the information because there's research in there. But you won't feel like you're reading a science book. And then there's self-help in there, but it's not like if you're burnt out, these are the 4 things you do. It's like me talking to my therapist and getting suggestions, or me talking to my patients and giving suggestions so you can get those things from it. But it's not like reading a self-help book or reading a research book.
Right. Well, that
Very
sounds,
cool.
yeah, I think
timely.
for sure. Absolutely.
I think it's timely. I mean, I think that we're on this side of the pandemic where people aren't talking about this stuff as much anymore. Like, I think there was a time where I was even surprised by how many people were interested in our own mental health. And I think now for some reason they think that like we're fine.
Mhm.
like it's cool when you take away that stressor. It wasn't like there were 100 to begin with, right? And so I think that I like to have the opportunity to like re-shine light back on that and remind people that we didn't just like come out the other side perfectly and we're fine now.
Right.
And also, make people kind of wonder what their doctors are thinking and doing and how they survive these things.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. I don't know. Are there very many books, or is this one of the first that kind of talks publicly about the emotional lives of healthcare workers?
I think they're like memoirs, and the people who write the memoirs talk about their own experience in that way, but it's probably one of the first ones that actually like I'm rare in that I see healthcare workers as patients. So it's
Mhm.
like a kind of weird window that not a lot of
Mhm.
people have. And so like that angle is definitely different. And then you get to see what's going on in my head a lot, for better or worse. And I think psychiatry is like a space that people don't understand very well and don't really like have a lot of experience with and get scared of. And so hopefully also like the secondary benefit would be like, oh, that wasn't too bad for that person. Or like, Jessi doesn't seem like a bad psychiatrist. Maybe psychiatrists aren't bad and I could ask for help if I need it, or meds are normal or whatever. So
Yeah.
that's like sort of the secondary purposes.
A little
that side of
voyeurism
things.
into what it might be like to see a psychiatrist.
Yeah. But at least in my brain, a lot of what's going on in my brain. So, that's its own beast. But I think a lot of us have similar kind of thoughts and insecurities and, things that we worry about that maybe people don't realize we worry about.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, congrats, and
Thank you.
definitely I hope people check it out. And it unfortunately on the cover is not a picture of you wearing like a black turtleneck with a corduroy jacket.
You
So
probably so the cover is emojis because I was like, I don't want like this traditional, like I don't want a couch, I don't want tissues,
Right,
I don't
right.
want, and they were like, oh,
Houndstooth.
but those are
Yeah.
the doctor books, or those are the therapy books. And I was like, please find another thing that represents feelings or my job. job. Like, just try. And I
Sometimes-
really like it.
Sometimes I
But-
wonder
Yeah.
just how much damage I have done to the field of psychiatry. But that's another story for a different day.
I should have worn a black turtleneck for the interview and just not talk to you much.
That's right. Just silence.
Yes.
Yeah, just like, oh, okay, but yeah.
Well, people can find out information about the book and is everything else you're doing on your website. That's drjessigold.com. What else is on the website?
Oh, lots. I write a lot, so
Yeah?
all those kind of pieces are there. People ask me about like the intersections between mental health and pop culture a lot, so I get to talk about
Oh,
that
nice.
on different places. Like I somehow am like the Taylor Swift expert for the Huffington Post about mental health, so that's been really fun. But that's all there. And then like if I am gonna be somewhere doing book stuff, like that'll be up eventually. It's a slow process to get that
Yeah.
scheduled, but I'll be there with some of our friends that we have in common and that
Oh,
have
great.
been on this
Oh, very
podcast.
fun.
Awesome. That's Dr. Jessi Gold, Jessi Gold.com. So Jessi, thank you so much for visiting with us. Always,
Yeah.
there's more other things I want to get to. I would love your take on about just TikTok and therapy and
Ooh.
just what the hell is going on there, just in general. But that's a big topic. So we'll have you come back and we'll talk about that another time.
Is
But
that going to be the title? TikTok therapy. What the hell is going on there?
it's just there's just a lot happening there. A lot
Yeah.
happening there that we need to dive into, but we'll save it for next time. So thanks
got
again
it.
for coming on. Hey, Kristen,
Yeah.
I think you've been neglecting our little friends here.
Oh. Do they need some attention?
They do, from you in particular.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're your favorite, the
Yeah.
Demodex mites.
Love
They're,
it. Love a good
they're
mite.
so cute, but they
Mhm.
can cause problems.
Yep.
Yeah, if you get like red, itchy, irritated eyelids,
Yeah.
it could be caused by these little guys.
That would not seem very fun.
Demodex blepharitis, they can't help it. They're just living their lives.
Guess so.
But it's not fun.
no,
It's
not for the
fun.
human.
And they're a lot smaller than this.
That's good.
They don't
I'm
look
very
like
thankful
this.
for that.
They're not quite as cute, but almost.
Okay.
All right, but this is not something you should get freaked out by.
Okay.
All right, you got to get checked out.
Yes.
To learn more about how Demodex blepharitis can affect you, to find out more, you go to eyelidcheck.com. Okay. That's EYELID check.com to get more information about Demodex blepharitis. I could talk to Jessi Gold for hours.
I know. She is so fun. And every time she comes on, it's just a blast.
It's a topic, I mean, just psychiatry in general.
It's fascinating.
It really is. And I know so little about it. Clearly, from the defense
Yes,
mechanisms
that's right.
game, I tried. I was sitting here trying to come up with these scenarios, reading. It's
You
like
should have run that one past me. You know
Sometime-
better than that. Like,
well,
that's more my
I
area.
did my best. I think
Yeah.
it went okay.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a struggle, but I want to hear what our audience thinks. So,
Yeah.
what did you? Whenever we talk to a psychiatrist again, should I bring out more defense mechanisms, or do you have other ideas for games that I could play with our psychiatrist guests? I'm always open to suggestions. You can email us knockknockhigh@human-content.com. Also, visit us on our social media platforms.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, us, Human Content,
That's right.
our
We've got lots of
podcast family.
Fun
Lots
podcasts.
of great stuff. Lots of cool stuff coming up too. At Human Content Pods on Instagram and TikTok. Thank you to all of the wonderful listeners leaving feedback and reviews. If you subscribe and comment on your favorite podcasting app or on our YouTube channel at Glockenfleckens,
That's right.
we can give you a shout out. Like at Emilio Guerrero 3964 on YouTube said, I think my favorite episodes are when it's just you two talking about life.
Oh, well, thank you.
I told you our
Blog
life
talks.
is interesting.
Is it?
Apparently, Emilio Guerrero thinks so, okay? And what more evidence do you need?
Maybe it's just
Thank you,
habituation
Emilio.
when you think your own life is not
I
very
suppose.
exciting.
Full video episodes are up every week on our YouTube channel at Glockenfleckens. Tons of cool perks on our Patreon. You got to check that out. Bonus episodes will react to medical shows and movies, hang out with other members of the Knock Knock High community. We have some open positions available. Come and join us. All right. You got to work to stay, though. I mean, everybody pulls their weight around here, and we're active in it there as well. We put in the work. early ad-free episode access, interactive Q&A, live stream events, much more. Patreon.com/GlockenFlecken or go to GlockenFlecken.com. Speaking of Patreon community perks, should we shout out to the Jonathans?
Of course, always.
All right. Patrick the CSC, Sharon S., Omar, Edward K., Stephen G., Jonathan F., Marion W., Mr. Granddaddy, Caitlin C., Brianna L., KL, Keith G., JJH, Derek and Mary H., Susanna F., Jenny J., Muhammad K., Aviga Parker, Ryan, Muhammad L., David H., Jack K., David H. again, Gabe, Gary M., Eric B., Medical Meg, Bubbly Salt, and
Pink Macho.
Patreon Roulette. Random shout out to Sally on the emergency medicine tier. Sally, thank you for being a patron. And thank you all for listening. We're your hosts, Will and Krista Planner, also known as the Glockenfleckens. Special thanks to our guest, Dr. Jessi Gold. Our executive producers are Will Flannery, Kristen Flannery, Aaron Courtney, Rob Goldman, and Shanti Brook. Editor and engineer Jason Portiza. Our music is by Omer Ben Zvi. To learn about our Knock High's program disclaimer and ethics policy, and of course, the submission verification and licensing terms, and the HIPAA release terms. One time, I think I just mentioned submission verification, but I didn't mention licensing terms.
Oh, no.
And we heard about it.
Okay, good.
So it's
someone
submission
caught you.
verification and the licensing terms. You can go to glockenflecken.com, reach out to us, knockknockhigh at human-content.com with any questions, concerns, or fun medical puns. Knock Knock High is a human content production.
Knock, knock, goodbye.
Hey, Kristen, you went to the doctor recently.
I did. I had my annual checkup.
Did they have a Jonathan?
They had a virtual Jonathan.
Oh.
Yes, in fact, it was a DAX Copilot
From
from
Microsoft?
Microsoft. Yes,
Those things are amazing. I love
they
them.
are.
It's just there's just so much documentation burden,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sure did your doctor look at you in the eye?
Yes, there was a lot of eye contact.
Isn't that great?
Mm-hmm.
It's just and the virtual Jonathan. Just I'm sure it lifted your doctor's spirits
Mm-hmm.
just
Put
to
a
be able,
pep in her step.
just to be able to get through the day and actually have like a relationship with you.
Right.
Is a huge deal. In fact, 80% of physicians who use DAX Copilot say it reduces cognitive burden.
I believe it. It seemed pretty slick.
Yeah, and you just be more focused on what you're doing and just do what we're trained to do, practice medicine.
That's right.
To learn about how DAX Copilot can help you reduce burnout and restore the joy of practicing medicine, visit aka.ms/knockknockhigh. Again, that's aka.ms/knockknockhigh. Thanks for watching the episode. You can find more on that playlist over there. If you prefer to listen or you just had your eyes dilated, you can binge full episodes wherever you get your podcasts. Or join the party over on Patreon, where you get early access episodes, hang out with us, get lots of exclusive bonus content. Hope you subscribe, leave a comment below. Let us know what you think.